All right, what is going on, everyone? And welcome back to the Mets Weekly Podcast as we are live at this very moment on YouTube and on X to discuss the latest news and rumors all spring training long in Mets land. But before we do that, I want to remind everyone to subscribe to the Mets Weekly YouTube channel for weekly episodes of our show that are now recorded live every Monday night, typically at 7 p.m. And we started off a little bit late. We apologize for that. Some technical issues. It happens. But for those of you watching or listening on playback, you want to join the conversation in the future, make sure to turn on those post notifications to know when we go live. For those of you in the live chat right now, we love reading your comments, your questions, your concerns, all of that great stuff. And if you feel like you're being ignored, you're not being ignored. You're just being starred throughout the show. We'll try to pull up as many as we can to keep the flow of the conversation going. Make sure to follow Mets Weekly on X and on TikTok for future content over there. And for our audio listeners, make sure to follow us on all of your favorite listening platforms to not miss the audio version of new episodes that go up at 9 a.m. the following day of recording. So without further ado, let's get into episode number 116. And what an eventful week it has been. Let's just say that it's spring training. We just kicked off um, for it, and it's already been stressful with some of the news that has been coming out. Of course, games have now officially begun, and we're seeing some good, some bad, some exciting, of course, with the new additions here. But Frank, you're here. You and me are here. We were supposed to have a special guest, but it ended up falling through. So I guess you guys are just stuck with just the duo of me and Frank today. But other than that, um, another week of craziness. What else can you say? And it doesn't stop.
Yeah, another week, another starting pitcher injury. So that definitely is not what you want to see. I mean, you already have one. You don't want to lose two arms, and you've already gotten that done. But at least they did play some games. We got to see those new additions, mainly Juan Soto. I mean, that was fun to see him for the first time in Mets uniform, and he did something phenomenal in his first time. And first of many is really what it comes down to. But you got to see one of the new pitching acquisitions, and again, just see a lot of the guys get started. It's just nice to see Mets baseball on the field, just doing what we love and what we want to see. So, there's some takeaways. You don't want to put too much stock into anything when it comes to spring training, whether the results are great or not great. But more so, it's just those other injuries that they've had. I mean, now we also have a position player who, while we weren't fond of, still could have had a decent role on the team. So he's down as well. And the Mets right now looks like they're taking the internal approach. So it becomes a more interesting spring training for the guys who are here because now there is more of an opening for more players. Because before you're looking at it, you're like, oh, well, the Mets added these guys. There only certain position battles really matter. But with two pitchers down already, utility infielder down, and we already had utility infielder questions to begin with. Now it's like a lot of these guys, like they're fighting for jobs. So while we assume that like certain guys are going to start the year in the minor leagues, that's probably not the case for a few guys. And if any more happen, then it's going to get interesting really soon. So they got to kind of stop the bleeding, so to speak. No more pitching injuries, please, because the depth is really getting put into full effect here because now your depth is what you're using. So now you don't really have extra options because those extra options are currently used.
Yep, I think it's also going to put a little bit more of a spotlight on some of the pitching prospects as well as to what they can actually plug in. There are going to be some guys who maybe were expected to be starting option or excuse me relief options that maybe are looked at as guys to give you starting. I'm not currently completely panicking at this current moment, but it does suck to see that you're kind of just in a scramble already in the first week of spring training games. And I think that that's the main reason as to why a lot of Mets fans are, in that kind of panic mode. And I 100% understand it. Right now, it's just something that continues to be the flow of spring training where guys just come into camp and they're just not fully stretched out. They're not fully at that point, and it just ends up being something that continues to happen because that's just how major league pitchers are. And we'll get into that in a second. But as for our comments, which we'll have plenty of them over the next 1 to 2 hours, I do want to talk about your guys' comments and your guys' input and tell you guys that if you are watching live, or on playback, you want to be a part of our show live here on air, call into our brand new 24/7 hotline with questions, comments, etc. 845-208-5677 and leave us a message that we prefer to be under 3 minutes long. Please refrain from using offensive and derogatory language and keep it Mets related. All of our calls will be pre screened for obvious reasons, and numbers will be blocked if you violate any of these rules. It is a one strike policy. Mets fans, we want to hear what you guys have to say, and I'm sure there's plenty of it, especially with this week. Give us your brutally honest opinions like we do every single week. That is 845-208-5677, and you could be featured at the end of tonight's show. That is 845-208-5677. And without further ado, let's get into the latest that has been going on in Mets land. It's been some good, some bad. It happens, but what can you say? But let's get into the latest story that we were pretty much, I don't know, I don't want to say blindsided by, but it just popped up out of nowhere when we didn't hear anything. Seems like it was under wraps for a few days, but it seems like we are going to have to do opening day and begin the season without Sean Manaea as a healthy option. As for those of you who do not know, Sean Manaea is expected to begin the regular season on the injured list due to a right oblique strain, and he is to be shut down from throwing for 2 to 3 weeks. The Mets currently view this injury as a relatively short-term issue, and they do expect him to return sometime in April, whether it is mid to late April. Sean Manaea was open, said that he felt the injury right when he arrived at camp. He tried to pitch through the injury, but the discomfort continued to plateau and stay at the same level. Didn't get worse from day one, which is probably the main reason as to why he's only expected to be out short term so far. But with the injury to Frankie Montas, it seems like, you know, two times a charm here. Next week, can we not do this to begin the show again for 3 weeks in a row? That would be awesome. But again, the impact of Sean Manaea, you know, we've talked about some of the health concerns with the certain arm slot. We've talked about, you know, just the certain concerns around this entire rotation. And right now, I would say that there is a little bit more coming of concern, even though it's not really, you know, even though it's not really, you know, specifically a long-term thing. Things can continue to linger. We know that they can, but at this right now, there's not that big much of a panic. To me, it really has nothing to do with who's in the rotation and who's bad and who's not. To me, right now, is who is going to give us those innings that Montas and Manaea were supposed to give us, especially being recently pitching over. I think both of them pitched over 150 innings last year. So again, you're going to need to get starter innings. We don't know where that's going to come from with beginning this year with opening day 2 starting pitchers down, which is something that I feel like is the main reason as to the concern. It really has nothing to do with the quality of arms. It's more of just, for me right now, where are we getting these innings? Because yes, we have a little bit deeper of a bullpen, but I'm not trying to tax them mid-April. And that's the main reason as to why this can get very concerning, being down at the starters that you are. Maybe there is one guy that impresses in camp, but it's a little too early to tell. Frank, I think that there's a little bit of both of the uncertainty from, you know, some guys who are not guarantees, some guys that were good, some had some injuries. I think it's really easy to completely unravel at this current moment. I really don't know how to look forward to opening day or look forward to what the plan is going to be opening day, because we have an entire spring training to still play. And who knows if we run into another injury, because we've already run into 2 in the first week and a half.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that really concerns me too is that you're looking at somebody like Sean Manaea, who actually was extremely healthy for the Mets last year, made every start. As we know, he kind of wore down the postseason a little bit, but for him to, what I think was most concerning was he said, "Oh, when I got here, I felt the oblique, and it's like, well, what happened? I mean, was it the plane ride? Like, what did you do? Was it the new bed in Florida? Like, how all of a
Must be the
sudden, you go,
water.
yeah, you go all off season fine, then you're like, oh, my oblique. Like that just was very strange to me. But it is concerning, something with an oblique, especially with pitching, because it's something that like it could re-aggravate kind of quickly. It's not like a traditional healing process, so it's something where like he could look like he's like, oh, I feel better, I'm ready to go. And then you get back on the mound and you re-aggravate it. And it's just something that could kind of linger a little bit. So obliques are always like a very difficult one. It's not one of those injuries where it's like, oh, well, we know he'll be out for this amount of time and then he's gonna return. Like it's just it doesn't always work like that. So I really don't love that it's a random oblique injury. And then even for Montas, I talked about it last time, but this past season he was healthy, but he's had injury concerns before. And I think for me, the bigger piece was I was more looking into the season, the rotation as like the consistency. I mean, injuries they could happen at any point, and this goes to show is that like you're like, oh well, the guy that made all the starts for us last year, he's the one that's going to be healthy. It's going to be Sanga that gets hurt, or it's going to be David Peterson that gets hurt. Like you never know which pitcher is going to go down, but you always have to be expecting that a pitcher or two can go down. So you should always be adding to pitching regardless. That's why we always say you can never have enough pitching. And for me, with who they had, I still had question marks because I just felt that there were a lot of non guarantees, considering this was like out of nowhere second half from Manaea, the injuries to Sang, David Pearson bounce back year, and then even from Montas, he struggled last year. So in general, I felt like this team could use an upgrade, like a C. So all these other guys that we talked about is like someone you could trust, like they're going to be good and durable. So I mean, there's two different things going on here. But I was just more concerned, can these guys be good? Now that they're not on the field, now I have both concerns. Now I'm like, are they good? And are they even healthy? Are they even available? So it's just not in a great spot right now. And like we said, we don't want to lose anyone else. And of course, it happens so late in the off season, and now where you're into spring training. So now you put yourself in a situation where if you were in negotiations for Dylan Cease or any starting pitcher for that matter, you can make anybody up here. You lose all the leverage because the team is like, oh, well, you guys need a pitcher now. Before you wanted a pitcher, now you need a pitcher. So the whole negotiations change, and they have like all the say here because you're the team that gets kind of desperate, and then you may end up giving some stuff that you won did not have to give up before, and also just give up things you did not want to. So they're in an interesting spot right now. And even if you look at the free agent market, now Quintana is like, oh, well, wait a minute. You guys didn't want me back. Now all of a sudden you have injuries. Now you want me back. Well, watch this. Now I want, X million more dollars. So it makes things tough in general. That's why we always say, get more as you can so that you're better prepared for this. Because I'll tell you what, if I'm going into the season and it's like I know Griffin Canning's in my rotation, plus Paul Blackburn, and then maybe McGill if we're going 6 man, that's not great. I mean, that is asking a lot. I mean, that could go bad in a hurry. And we have Juan Soto and nice bats, but you're going to need more than that. So I am curious to see what happens here. I'm hoping that, like, as so far we know that like the Montas and the Meninders are not super serious. We're like they're going to be out for a long, long period of time. So you hope that they come back and you can settle it and just kind of tread water, so to speak. But like we said, we just can't have anything else. So I mean, this is where they're at right now, but it's definitely not the start you hope for.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of just dips into the fact of what I continue to say is that basically a pitcher's job now is basically just to get injured. Like, that's literally their job now because at any point it can happen. And like you just said, of like, oh, well, there was somebody who can guarantee us innings last year. The next year, maybe they're just not as healthy. And that's the main reason as to why you can just, continue to flip a coin of who is going to be available that day or who's going to be available at this current moment. Right now, with two pitchers down, right now you're probably also pushing a little bit more of the risk to Kodai Senga because maybe you have no choice just to do a 5 man rotation, which seems to be the one thing that would, help out Kodai Senga in that way and kind of just, you'd have to play that day to day of, okay, when would we have these off days or when can we skip these off? Like you're going to have to build things around a little bit in that way. Do I think that they need to add to this starting rotation? It's really, really hard to say because it's so easy to just, at the current moment, you need this. Let's replace it with this because we have it and we can do it. And it's really hard to say that because again, there's a point of emphasis that goes on with the Mets payroll right now, as to where not only are they in the luxury tax, there's also just kind of a thought of the fact that the Mets are kind of in the red from last year. Like they lost money last year, and they're not trying to completely push the 100 the $400 million payroll completely. Again, it Steve Cohen taking money out of his own pocket and then making a profit in that way. If he's in the red, he's not going to try and you know continue to toss money at it. I mean, I understand he's worth what he is, but again, it's not worth it in terms of the baseball business part of it. And maybe there is something, that goes on, when you go on the IL because you're paying guys to be injured and be healthy as well. It doesn't matter what you're doing. And that's the main reason as to why paying pitching is just ridiculous at this point. And again, always seems like those key guys end up going down. And to be honest, if they were to go after these big, quality arms and they were to get a Snell or a Burns, I mean, I personally I would feel the exact same way of concern for their health as well because that just continues to be how it is with these pitchers, and that's the main reason as to why I don't flip shit whenever I see a pitcher go somewhere else because again, it's so unpredictable how you can catch lightning in a bottle. What's the best time to release it? When is the best time to utilize it? At any point, one of these pitchers are going to go down, and that's the thing is why I'm like, okay, you can go for your star power at the deadline if you're looking to go all in. That's fine, but going into a season, you have 162 games to play. And there's a main reason as to why 8 to 10 to maybe 12 arms with major league experience is the best way to go. They may not be the best names, they may not be the best ERAs or best this, but these guys, maybe they are healthy and you can bring it in with a next man up mentality. The main reason as to why they have to do this at this current moment and go after these types of quantity of arms is because you have to develop your own pitching to bring in this endless cycle. We talk about this all the time with teams like the Rays, the Brewers, which David Stearns was at. These other teams, a team, a pitcher gets hurt, they fill it in with somebody internally. And that's the main reason as to why it's going to take a while before they do something like that. And, it's going to be tough to kind of just lean on one guy making $35 million a year to pitch every 5 years or 5 days, excuse me. And that's the thing. It's like, I understand it's very, very frustrating with the Mets rotation right now because you have a lot of guys who are just not flashy at all. They don't jump off the page at all. Um, but right now, with 162 games ahead of you, I'm all about just filling in the innings and not really just completely filling in a super rotation. I feel like there's a lot of Mets fans that see the Dodgers rotation. They're like, we should be like them. It's kind of hard to do that. Like you can't really do that because they're so far away from having those resources to do that. And are they leaning on, Kodai Senga a little bit right now? Possibly. Hopefully Sean Manaea gets back and he's healthy. It doesn't seem like it's as severe. You never know if there is a setback or whatever, but you just need names out there. Just bodies out there because you never know what is going to happen. Now, I do want to bring in some people from the chat here. Truman Quinn saying McGill, another opening day start, tying Seaver. Yeah, he's getting up there. What is this? This is would that be his? This would be his second if he did, right? Is his second? I don't even know. He's been in the opening day rotation, I think, every
Yeah,
other year. Yeah, every
yeah,
single year. And he's but I think Rosie saying the Mets having a rotation is already full of questions. Losing two arms is not good. Yeah, again, hopefully you can just create a good arm in aggregate, right? I mean, I don't know what to say at this point. I don't think that there's any way that they kind of just completely solve this with one type of signing because again, it's nothing that you can really stop right now. And I think that we talk about it all the time. Pitching's in a regular motion. There's nothing that you can do. So one little tweak, such as the delivery, different arm slot, Philip coming in here saying this is from changing his delivery. It could be. It could possibly be. Who knows? You just never know. But as for some other people in the chat here, we have Chad, who um, is in the chat. Let's see some other. Darren Rivera is in here. Stanley, we have Ibby coming in here, who was here last week, saying that Ibby guy that spoke last night, very handsome guy, knows a thing or two. I don't know. I thought that guy was a little ugly. I don't know. Kind of weird. Anyways, Daniel coming in here, Darren Rivera. We've got plenty. Christine saying Senga is a given to go down. We need a serious starter. No McGill, please. Unfortunately, you have no choice right now. That's the thing. It's like I think there is a goal every year, and it seems like the goal every year recently has been to push Tyler McGill out of the opening day rotation. But no matter what, every spring he ends up by default going into that rotation. So we'll see what we get from Tyler McGill. At one point, maybe they do make some kind of a move, but I don't see it possibly happening. Again, there's also the point of context. And listen, I understand money is a little bit is a kind of a non-factor as of right now. With the Mets' current situation, but again, at some point you're got to have some kind of a cutoff. And when it comes to Jose Quintana, at most you're probably giving him like 8 million, 10 million, something like that. And then it's the 110% that you're adding on with luxury tax. So, is he worth like a $21 million? And then you also have the rest of the roster. So like it's not just, well, we have the money, just spend it. You're kind of breaking you're kind of breaking these thresholds at the most that you want. And it seems like the Mets wanted to be at that 330 to 340 range. They're already at that 385 right now. So, I mean, at some point, they're going to have to rely on something internally and see what you get from some guys internally. Hopefully guys are able to stay healthy. But again, it's just that's the thing. It's like it'd be saying, Jose Quintana, he's not worth 4 million, let alone 20. And I think that there's a lot of Mets fans that are willing to sign somebody like Jose Quintana because they're very familiar with him. Personally, I would just let it go. I've already been vocal about this. I understand. I feel like the rest of his season last year, the from September on, he was good for us, and I feel like that's getting amplified at this current moment. But if you look at it from the entire season that he gave you, when you need innings and you need these quality innings, it was a struggle for Jose Quintana throughout the entire season. He ended well. It was skewered with that incredible run he had at the end. But overall, I don't see that solving anything. Yes, he will add some depth to the rotation, but like stacking on depth to have depth to get the depth for the depth for more of the depth. I don't know really how that would solve anything. I feel like there are maybe some young upside pitchers that can maybe eat some innings. Maybe you do have like these games where starters are stacked onto each other if some are not healthy, where you have McGill and Canning in one game, innings 1 through 3, innings 4 through 6. You're going to probably have to get creative if you keep getting injuries like this. Right now, I'm not freaking out, but there is definitely a level of concern if we continue to go down this path at the pace that they are going. I feel like at one point you got to have somewhat of a cutoff, and you're going to have to do something. There is a very glaring reason as to why the Mets can't really splurge on pitching right now. But, I'll be just told to jump off a bridge if I mention that. So, anyways, speaking of Jose Quintana, I asked you guys in the chat if you would bring him back due to the injuries to Frankie Montas and Sean Manaea. 48% of you are saying yes, 31% of you are saying no. 21% of you are 50-50. The main reason as to why I asked this, and we had somebody here, one of our good friends, Ken, saying, why wouldn't we bring him back? Again, there's a financial situation in this way where if they were to give him the money that he would get on the market, which, to be honest, it may be a little bit more than you expect, even with him still available out there, you're also adding on double that plus 10%. I mean, you're adding a lot, spending that amount of money. And again, we're going to be going into the reverse part of things as to where if Jose Quintana ends up getting hurt, which we've seen a Jose Quintana get hurt in spring training, may I add, it's happened before. So, and then it's just going to look like another waste. Like, again, here's the thing. If you want to stack up arms right now, and if you want to bring in somebody on a minor league deal and, somebody else on a major league deal, kind of in that realm of Julio Tehran that they did, like the 5 million, 6 million, something like that. I don't know what to say at this point other than you're running out of room to make these types of moves. And I feel like whether it's, the Frankie Montas situation or whether it is, just the overall, addition from Clay Holmes, who we will get into in a second, Griffin Canning, or, bringing back Sean Manaea, they were going to have to acclimate it in some way. And I feel like at some point, the Mets are just going to have to, um, at some point, the Mets are just going to have to bite the bullet in some way and use guys internally. And and there's a possibility, who knows, that you see somebody starting this year that you didn't expect to be starting. Somebody like Max Kranick, who we saw take a start. I know that they don't want to rush the prospects. I understand not wanting to. But there's definitely going to be a call for pinch there, but I don't see them completely rushing to the ends of the earth to sign someone right now with 162 games ahead of them. Maybe there's going to be some games that feel like throwaway games, but right now they don't really have that sort of a choice. And listen, I think that, you know, fans not caring about the money, again, it makes sense why they don't. And I understand why Mets fans would say, well, this is this. I feel like right now, if they were to add someone, I see some people talking about Lance Lynn in the chat, it's not going to save anything. It's not going to solve anything, but keep the long list down of guys who have experience. It doesn't matter, you know, right now I feel like the mindset is just scrambling because of these injuries that happen all the time. But you're just saying, oh, this is just a name that I know. If that makes sense, I don't know. I'm rambling at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of times it's like, oh, well, we're losing players. Like, where can we pivot? And the problem, like I said, it's like these injuries happen so late, and the fact that you're in spring training now, it's not like there's all these options still available. So it's like when you go to the list, you only see a few guys that you could really choose from, and you're like, well, there's Lance Lynn and there's Quintana. I also want to say like Alex Wood. Like you're down to a very select few available of guys who are still free agents. So that's all you really have to choose from if you're not going to go internal. And I think like one more thing to add is that we talked about like, this shows the importance of developing young pitching. Well, they're in that process. They're just not there yet. I mean, Blade Tidwell started today. You saw the inconsistencies that we've seen in Syracuse. Good stuff, results, hit or miss. And just kind of like Brandon Sproat, we've seen good highlights, but he's not ready quite yet. Same thing goes with Tongue and McLean. Like eventually, maybe a couple of years from now, if a Mets veteran pitcher gets hurt, it's like, oh, well, we have our young guys coming up and they could fill in. They're not there yet. So that's the other thing, is why you kind of have to look at some of these free agents, because your young guys are not ready to step up quite yet. They're still developing. They're still very young in that process. So it's definitely not the greatest timing that you don't have all these young arms ready to go when you have these injuries on the big league level.
Yeah, I really feel like it's all really the thought of how the depth kind of pans out throughout the season, because they're going to have to get innings or types of innings from more than just five starting pitchers. It's just something that happens in reality. Ricardo saying in one point, saying, I've been saying this for a while, that Cohen has a limit on the amount that he's willing to spend, and I was laughed at. Again, I don't think that I don't think that there's a thought of like some kind of a budget. I feel like there's just more of what can happen on return on investment here. Last year, it was something that was gone noticed, that at one point the Mets were losing money. Probably is the main reason as to why, because of the first 2 months of the season being so awful that fans were not showing up. I don't think that they're going to see that problem with what they have right now. For fans to possibly show up, it's not going to be an issue down the line. But I feel like if you do make like these investments and you don't get the return that you want, you're not going to go full on fetch because of how it can go long term. So I don't know how. I don't know how to really talk about the spending limit or the spending mindset or whatever. Um, but I just don't know how I don't know how like they really acclimate this in a way as to where they can get the best of both worlds here. And that's the problem with this, because you're going to need a well-oiled machine to have an actual rotation or have a actual, process in place as to where you don't run out of arms in this way. Because like there are guys who, in some way, you are bleeding. In your starting rotation. The Dodgers, who won the World Series, they were bleeding in their starting rotation. They still were able to figure it out. They had all of these arms. But, you just never know. For those of you in here, I don't know if you guys hear if my mic is low. I'm hearing that the volume is low. So I'm going to try to turn it up here. I don't know if you guys hear me a little bit louder. My mic is super low. Yeah. Okay. Hold on. All right. I think, does that help it a little bit? I don't know. Perfect now? Perfect. Okay. Yeah, I'm working with some settings that I don't want to be working with right now, so my apologies. Um anyways, other than that, I feel like it's so hard to articulate what the Mets can possibly do right now with the rotation, because right now I feel like, again, it's too late at this current moment, and just signing guys just to sign guys because we have a hole on the roster, we have to do it. um it's just at this point it's trying to solve a problem that has no solution to it. Like I said last week, you're going to have to put a fastball velocity limit on 95. You're going to have to lower the mound. You're going to have to do a lot of things in this league to prevent injuries, and you're still just going to have injuries no matter what. It seems like it happens to the Mets and only the Mets in all of existence. It seems like to a lot of fans, but again, there just really isn't much out there um, as to where can we actually build something right now through free agency. The answer is no. Again, it just, Jose Quintana is not solving anything. I personally would not go that direction. Um, I think Spencer Turnbull could be somebody out there that they add in, but it just again, nothing's gonna it's nothing is going to help this situation, and I feel like it's all of us just like kind of rushing to a quick fix here, which it's just not realistic in a way, and I'm hoping that in some way somebody steps up. I don't know who it's going to be, but hopefully somebody steps up, whether it is Griffin Canning. I don't think Griffin Canning can be worse than last year. But when you put on a Mets uniform, they take that as a challenge. Tyler McGill is going to have to exist in this rotation, whether people like it or not. Not ideal, but you just never know what's happening, with this rotation. And again, I feel like if you want to place any blame on Stearns, go ahead. If you want to do it, go ahead. It's really really hard for me to just completely villainize Stearns in this way, where this type of philosophy is the main reason as to why stuff like this happens. Like yes, you lost Montas. You're losing Manaea probably for the first few weeks of the season at least. It's so hard to articulate it to one way because again, this is the like when fans talk about this being David Stern's fault to build this rotation, this is the reason why he built this rotation the way that he did, because these pitchers continue to break. They just continue to break. Every single pitcher is just at injury risk as compared to anybody, as compared to anybody else, from any single level. I mean, like that's basically how I look at it. Injury, Montas has been injury prone in the past. Absolutely, we've talked about, this position, softest tissue. We got a update here from Rosie K saying that the Mets signed Maycol Vasquez to a minor league deal. I don't know who this is, but I can do a little bit of a quick research on him. But it seems like the Mets are trying somewhat to do something with the pitching depth, but it's not going to be major league additions as to what I expect for it to be. Not sure who he is. All right, we'll see. We'll do a little bit of a breakdown on him later on, but I do want to talk about a pitcher that is. I do want to talk about a pitcher that is healthy, and we did get a first look at as a starting pitcher, and that being Clay Holmes. Now, Clay Holmes made his debut earlier, a few days ago. It was the first game of spring training that was overshadowed by Juan Soto going yard and exciting all Mets fans. But I do want to do a little bit of a rundown of what we saw from Clay Holmes, which was pretty impressive. Let's just say that. The 31-year-old right-hander made his first start since September 30th, 2018 with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and it could not have gone better, tossing 3 perfect innings with 3 strikeouts, registering 6 swings and misses on 34 pitches. His reacclaimed 4-seam fastball sat at 95 to 96 and top 97, with his patented sinker touching 98 miles an hour. He also showcased his brand new kick changeup with 15 inches of horizontal break, and his new low 90s cutter with RPMs in the 2400 range. You see his brand new fastball sitting 96 to 97. He is, of course, more of the sinker baller that he is. He was, of course, great to a fault at inducing ground balls throughout his entire career. So it's not like the Mets, are bringing in guys to just eat innings and strike guys out. We saw a little bit of an adjustment with the arm angle. It's a little bit lower compared to last year. I don't think there's much from there. But overall, a very good debut from Clay Holmes, of course. But overall, him mixing and matching some things that were new. His new changeup. He threw quite a few of those. Of course, the fastball of usage. I'm pretty sure last year he only threw like 3 or 4 in total, so he threw a little bit more than combined to last year, of course. So it was a good look overall from a guy like Clay Holmes to get 3 innings out of him. He faced 9 batters. Seemed like everything came easily to him. Was throwing strikes. It was good. Changeup, I believe, was reaching 90 miles an hour, so I think it's a little bit harder of a changeup, which it seems like a little bit more of the late break. Like I said, 15 inches of horizontal break. Overall, that four seam that he doesn't seem to use as much. We've talked about vertical approach angle hovering around 4. It's what you want, 17 inches of induced vertical break. And it seems like he's starting to adjust to that starter point. I think there's a little bit of concern of his stuff losing effectiveness later down the line. It seemed like that was one of the concerns that that kind of behooved Clay Holmes, even in smaller workloads coming out of the bullpen with the Yankees. But overall, I think it was a successful first start for Clay Holmes, something that this staff definitely needs, obviously, going down the stretch with these 2 injuries. Frank, I'll turn it over to you here. Successful debut for Clay Holmes, who has not pitched in the starting role for, what is that calculated, like 7 years? I mean, it's been a while, so good first impression. Let's just say that.
Yeah, I think the big thing when you're talking about a guy going from being a reliever to a starter is the arsenal. I mean, just having to change the kind of pitcher that he is. I mean, he was someone that really relied, sinker sweeper, but for him to add that change up, mix in a cutter too. I really think that's very encouraging as far as this transition that we talked about, because we talk about the bad news that we've gotten when it comes to starting pitchers, like what happened with Manaea Montas up at the beginning. So like you want to see something good happen, because one of the concerns going in is like Clay Holmes not being a starting pitcher is in your rotation. Like we had no idea how this is going to go. So it was nice to see that the first start went very well. Yes, not the greatest competition. Yes, spring training, but overall, like you show, I mean, it's more so like the process. Like it's like whether the results were there or not, to see that the stuff was still graded out well and that he has other pitches to use. I think that's the most encouraging part of it, regardless of what happened. And I was pleasantly surprised that he pitched 3 innings in his very first start of spring training,
Yeah.
working his way up to be built up to be a starter. So I think all of that was just very, very encouraging. And it's something that they are going to need with the state of the rotation is right now, because it's like somebody needs to step up. You're down Manaea, down Montas. If Clay Holmes is that guy that could actually step up for you, that would be massive for this team. So I definitely was very pleased with what I saw. And, I'm looking forward to his next start, see if he's able to replicate it. But for me, my biggest concern was that pitch mix. If he was going to add new weapons, he did, and they looked good.
Yeah.
So I got to feel really good about what you saw.
Yeah. The overall usage, like I said, with his fastball, he didn't seem to use it as much. It seemed like he was starting to, I wouldn't say tip it, but he seemed like he was a little bit off balance with it. That seemed like he just wasn't getting the right grip there. Obviously, from a sinker to a fastball, it's different types of velocity, and throwing harder or throwing in that type of direction. You don't want to overdo it, because again, that is what can cause a lot of injuries, especially with just breaking pitchers in general, but also with sinkers. He's always been the sinker baller. But the main reason as to why I've always been good with this addition, and even though his workload might go up a little bit compared to what we were expecting. Um, with Manaea and Montas both out already, but I think it's really, really easy to say that the transition to a starter for Clay Holmes, I feel like, was definitely not easy, but I feel like a little bit more refined in that way, only because he's always been a big ground ball pitcher, and ground balls continue to get outs for you, inducing soft contact. That's just how it is. They were talking about it on the broadcast that the Mets seem to go more in the ground ball realm for everything. Obviously, these guys that chase velocity, chase strikeouts and swings and misses, they're always at risk for injury. But injury is injury with everyone, as we have said. Guys like Manaea, who just went down, who doesn't throw relatively hard. There's a little bit harder now since Driveline, but again, there is a lot of factors that go into the building up of a starting pitcher, and I've always felt like Clay Holmes, you know, from the very beginning, from when they did sign him, the best thing that you can do is induce ground balls to be a starter and give you that type of length. And then the stuff just kind of comes after it. Overall, his great stuff and his slider, which he didn't even use that much a few days ago. Again, there's a way that as to where there's contact management involved. If he locates properly, he is good. We've talked about him, with the home run issues, of course. He has a little bit more room now to kind of grow in that way from, a certain home run or whatever. We did not get to see him pitch from the stretch yet. So he did not allow a base runner, which, that sucks, right? But again, he's not going to go complete perfect innings every single time. So maybe next time, if he does end up walking guys, because he's had walk problems in the past, he's had these certain times where he just gives up a lot of base runners and he's put into the stretch. So we're going to see this new pitch mix from the stretch as well. And hopefully maybe we see that again, because again, I don't think he's going to pitch 3 perfect innings the next time or 4 perfect innings if they give him an extra inning for the next time through the rotation. But I think it really was encouraging to see and definitely a positive as compared to what we've been going on with the last week with this pitching staff, with the overall health of these guys. Hopefully we get to see a little bit more, from the rest of this rotation, of course. Holmes seems to be the only guy that has, gotten the full reps that we expect to be on the opening day roster if he is healthy. But I think at one point, he definitely seemed to be ahead of pretty much everyone here. It seemed like he had the workload beginning way before pitchers and catchers reported anyway. So it always seemed like, the pitchers always seem to be ahead of the hitters, which is a good thing. But one thing I will say is in some of these pitches that I felt like were a little bit uncompetitive or just a little bit too much of the plate, it seemed like he was contact managing fine. Like it didn't seem like, well, here's a meatball, he makes one mistake, it's going over the fence. Could it be just these hitters are just not ready yet for it and pitchers ahead of the hitters? Sure. But one thing is the first day of spring, overshadowed, of course, by Soto's home run and his entrance into Mets land. But Clay Holmes had quite a appearance. Let's just say that. I can go into the chat here. Rosie saying it looks like Holmes has really been working hard to get ready for the season. He seems ahead of schedule. Yeah, like I said, again, you just never know, how these guys come out. Maybe there is a way that the Mets just need to have their pitchers come in earlier to stay healthy. I don't know. They just need the reps earlier. I don't know, but it's all past now, so maybe something to mark down for spring. But at one point, you never know what is going to happen with pitching because so many different things can happen. One little tweak and it can all be over. One little this, one little that. One healthy season, one groove that the guy gets in. You just never know. Dolo saying Clay Holmes will be the opening day starter with some crying, laughing emojis here. It all really has to do with the overall volume that you get from him. You never know what he looks like getting deep into games, but so far he made a really good impression. But you just never know. Ricardo agreeing, saying that Holmes looked good. Again, there is definitely some factors in this game, which Richard does specify. They should back off the pitch clock a little bit. And that's another reason as to why these guys are getting hurt, but it seems like a lot of the next younger wave are kind of getting more reps in that type of rhythm. But as for the veterans, it's a little bit more of an adjustment we've seen some complaints from other pitchers that we've had, like Scherzer, Carrasco, um, of the pace of the game now with the pitch clock, which I don't think helps personally. I feel like you've had a pitching epidemic of injuries since, but I understand wanting to speed up the game in that way. But at some point, they're going to have to adjust it in some way to where the pace is good for the health of these pitchers, because it definitely does play a factor into it. I don't know if you agree with that in a way. It's just I feel like at some point maybe it's fine with the young guys in that rhythm of how they're brought up, but with some of the veterans right now, it's spotty.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to consider. I mean, it's not one of those things. It's kind of like when you're doing an experiment. Like it's not a one for one. It's like, okay, well, how do guys who have been brought up with the pitch clock and are much younger, do not have as much mileage and age on their arms? How do they react
Yeah,
to it compared to veteran starters who are used to the same routine and like same like just way that they
yeah,
approach it? So because it's like, oh well, there weren't injuries in the minors, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not going to be injuries in the major league. So it doesn't necessarily work like that. I mean, time will continue to tell, but I mean, I just feel like by all accounts, with every rule change that you've seen, at the end of the day, it's a business and it's entertainment business, and it's like,
yes,
how do we make the sport more appealing to a younger generation where maybe attention spans are not what they were. Everyone wants more action. They don't want so much waiting around. Even as an older folk myself, I like seeing the game played a little
yeah,
faster. I wasn't a big fan of the million mound visits and the stepping off, and they
y-
could drag on from time to time. But I think in general, like I understand what they're going for, but I don't want to see it be something where it does cause so many injuries, because for
yeah,
me, it's like, well, I'd rather just see the best players play baseball and
yeah,
see a good brand of baseball than it just be super fast and a bunch of guys are getting hurt. So I just don't like to see injuries. So, whatever rules they have to do to make sure that players are staying more healthy, that's what I'm for. And listen, that might be changing up the schedule, because I mean that's something that, like, some sports want more games, some sports want less games. If you want, and that's also like you're talking about, like, you want viewership. I feel like, to some people,
yeah.
162, it's a tough sell. Like, it's
Yeah,
a
you're
lot
also
of
starting a
games.
little bit earlier every year
Yeah,
too. I mean,
yeah, I
yeah,
mean, there's a lot of different things they could do. Like, you got WBC, so different start dates. Starting
yeah,
series, overseas, so like one team starts earlier than everybody else. But I feel like a lot of times, sometimes people might not watch because, like, oh, it's 162. I mean, why do I have to see this particular game? Like, it's not a big deal. And with the expanded wild card, like, so many teams are getting in that the regular season doesn't have the
yeah,
same value, and you're seeing a lot of wild card teams make deep playoff runs, like the way the
yeah.
Mets did. I mean, they got to the National
They
Championship
did.
Series
Yeah,
in the wild card position. And so again, you're like, well, why am I watching the regular season, fight for the division when the division is kind of losing value to some
yeah,
extent? So I mean, there's a lot of different things that they can consider. So it's like you could have traditional baseball, maybe less games, and maybe just in general less games, more rest could equal less injuries. So it's like you might have to compromise somewhere else, but that's probably
yeah,
what they don't want to do, because then less tickets. So it's like there's a lot of
yeah.
things going on here, like from a business standpoint. So I always find it very fascinating, but I understand what they're doing, but I do not like seeing the amount of injuries, because it's not fun seeing all the stars go down. I mean, it really is not.
Yeah, they've always continued to struggle to find the middle, with these types of regulations here, and hopefully they somewhat figure it out. I mean, there could be plenty of adjustments to the game, and then they make them every single year that end up being a factor in performance or the quality of the game. Um, but at some point, they're gonna have to figure out a way to stabilize this, and maybe there's a way that they do. Maybe if it's like, I don't know, lowering the mound or something, or I don't know, but like these whole limits on things. Some of them work, some of them don't. The pick off stuff and the stealing attempts and the this and that. I mean, there's a lot of different things that work on a limit, and there's some things that work on a timer, some things that work in that way. They're gonna have to find a median with it. I don't really trust the commissioner as of right now to figure it out, because he just seems, to be who he is. And that's all we'll really say about that because you never know who's watching, right? Anyways, now speaking of some of those injuries, Frank, I'm going to flip it over to you with the injury report uh, added on with Sean Manaea. So, what do we got here this week?
Alrighty, so we are going to start it off with the first pitching injury that we knew of. We talked about it last week, but Mets starting pitcher Frankie Montas flew to New York to receive a PRP injection for his high-grade lat strain that he suffered last week. The veteran right-hander revealed that he felt the symptoms of the injury during the first bullpen session at the beginning of camp. Montas is expected to begin playing catch in 4 to 6 weeks. Matt Allen, Mets pitching prospect Matthew Allen has been throwing bullpens and live batting practice sessions during minor league camp. The 24-year-old is eyeing the long-awaited return to the mound in March after undergoing 2 Tommy John surgeries and a nerve correction in his right arm. Allen is a former third-round pick by the Mets all the way in 2019 with just 10 and a third career innings ever since. Bryce Montes de Oca, the big reliever, underwent Tommy John surgery over the offseason after his rehab assignment was cut short due to arm fatigue towards the end of the 2024 season. This procedure was the right-handed flamethrower's third Tommy John surgery over the past 5 years. Nick Madrigal, Mets infielder, left Sunday's game in West Palm Beach with a shoulder injury after charging a ground ball playing shortstop. MRI imaging revealed a fracture in his left shoulder, and he will undergo a CT scan later this week for further information. Mets manager Carlos Mendoza stated that the veteran infielder will be out for a long time. Pete Alonso, Mets slugger Pete was hit in the eye on a short hop throw on Thursday afternoon. Alonso exited the field with the trainers, but returned to practice quickly in good and no concern of any further injury. I mean, when it came to Pete, we saw him get the nice hit today. We drove in a couple runs, so by all
Yep.
accounts, he seems all right. Just some guys getting unlucky, though. I mean, between Bryce, between Matthew Allen, we talked about
Yep.
earlier, like pitching. I mean, you just have some
Yeah.
guys who it's like they come back and they get hurt, and it's to the arm constantly. So it's not always so much like, oh, he's going to come right back and be fine. Pitching is just so tricky like that some guys come back and they're fine, and some guys come back and they keep getting re-injured. So it definitely
Yeah.
was a rough week. Luckily, Pete was okay because that was just a real scary thing. I mean, here you are in practice, boom, short hop right in the face,
Yeah.
and you see a video of the guy laying on the ground. The trainers are there, so at
Yeah.
least he's okay.
The background
But
music didn't help either. So that was,
no, but I feel like for Montas, it's kind of something we talk about Manaea, but it's like first bullpen session, like boom, lat strain. Like, I mean, what are we doing in the off season that like as soon as we get to the big stage, now
yeah.
it's just boom, we're hurt. Like, I mean, what kind of
Yeah.
training are we doing that as soon as we get on the field, we're having injuries?
Yeah, it's definitely an epidemic as of right now, which is where we hold our breath, of course, going into spring training because we always do get like these news stories or these reports that come out about injuries because these guys aren't fully ramped up yet. And as for Bryce Montes de Oca, I know that a lot of people have been asking in our chat about him. We didn't really have an update, but I did talk about it before I think the offseason began. I said that there was fear about a third Tommy John surgery, and he ended up getting that third Tommy John surgery. I'm not here to declare anything, but odds are that his career is most likely done. You never know. There are guys that have come back. You never know what happens. But it's when you get to that third Tommy John surgery, especially in that short span that they have had, at some point, that's where you get to the career threatening part of it, especially with Bryce Montes de Oca of how violent that guy throws. It's just an injury waiting to happen, and we've talked about it before, but you just never know. Anyways, I feel like there's other in point of injuries. Leon saying with the injuries to Montas and Manaea, how would you proceed regarding this rotation? I think it's really, really easy to just go out and panic move no matter what, like we have said. But you're running out of options here, and there's a little bit more of tax plus tax right now going on with the Mets if you were to bring somebody in right now. I feel like they're just going to kind of look at it from the depth as they get healthier, and as the important part of the season, hopefully they're a little bit more healthy going forward. Because it's probably going to be rough to start off the season with the pitching staff, um, but you just never know in that way.
Yeah, I think you might have to consider having Budo go to the rotation just for
You
the
might,
time
yeah,
being, just to kind of stabilize everything. If you see that Canning is still brutal and Blackburn is still struggling, or maybe he gets hurt again. So, like, if you see things are not working out, Budo, I think, would be your next most ready option because at least he has that starting pitching experience.
yeah.
So, maybe Budo for now, and then as guys come back, you can then transition them back into the bullpen. So, that's something they could consider if they want to stick internal. It's like, yes, like you said, it's easy to make the panic signing, whether that is Quintana or I saw someone mention like David Robinson earlier. Like you could add a reliever to then make the transition of moving
Yeah.
Budo to the rotation a little better because because you're kind of down in one area, you don't want to bring yourself down in another as well. So maybe trying to like replace him in the pen, move him to rotation. That might give them at least one more option without having to commit to another starting pitcher.
Yeah, that could be something that they could try to do, is adding in a major league reliever to kind of push Budo up or push somebody up into the rotation if they need, so be it. I don't think that the panic level is that high at this moment. Brad in here saying Eric Fetty, there was a report talking about, um, the Cardinals entertaining a trade for Eric Fetty before the season began. It seems like they want to put the young right-hander Michael McGreevy, who is one of their pitchers, that they want to put him into the rotation. So they're considering it of possibly moving him. We've seen Eric Fetty be linked to the Mets many times before, so it could possibly happen. Maybe there is a move if there is another injury that happens. Right now, I don't think that there's much panic. They're just kind of trying to get into the swing of spring right now. But again, right at this current moment, it doesn't look amazing. Um, but you just never know how it's going to look down the stretch of the season, who's going to be reliable, who's not going to be reliable. I really just have no real reaction to this happening. It sucks, but it just continues to be the deal with starting. Like I said, they're paid to get hurt. That's literally it. That's literally what their job is now, is to get hurt. And I'm not saying that as a good thing. I'm saying that as the reality. Like that's basically just what starters have become now. You just never know. But you know, pitching being the irregular motion. Rich. You know, Richard's saying, I'm not saying eliminate the pitch clock, but add a few seconds so the players can get a little bit of a breather. Again, they're going to have to adjust it in some way, because it seems like it is somewhat of a factor because the rapid increase of things like that are going to be, they are continuing to elevate. And it seems like we're getting a decent amount of injuries throughout the entire season. And with that, as well as the intensity of 162 games to play, you just never know. I don't know what the deal is with that, but we will see. Speaking of a deal that we don't really know much about, and we're going to see how it pans out through the season, I want to talk about Starling Marte for a second because we did get some public comments, and even though we have had this topic of discussion many, many times before, I feel like there is another piece of perspective right now, adding on to what his role is and how he kind of fits into this formula. I don't know how to say it, especially when you have kind of the corners of the outfield locked down right now. If somebody moves over to DH or whatever for a day or whatever. But I do want to get into some of the comments from Starling Marte, who is still in the mix at this current moment. He talked about his outlook for the 2025 season. Now we obviously know that Starling Marte was playing right field for us for the last 3 seasons when he was healthy and on the field. And the Mets, of course, signing Juan Soto to that lucrative deal. That was no longer going to be the case anymore, especially on a regular day. And he talked about the on his behalf and his reaction to the Soto signing. We know that he's very close with Juan Soto off the field, and he said that they spoke to me before the Soto signing and after the signing, and they reiterated that they're going to try to move me. At the end of the day, they were very clear, very honest with me up front. They obviously want what's best for the team, but they also want what's best for my future. So they were really helpful and really transparent about the situation. Now, the possibility of him being traded, like he said that's something that's completely out of his control. That's in the control of the front office. But in the meantime, I am here. I'm going to continue to work as hard as I possibly can. I'm going to go out there and compete. I'm going to try to give the young guys good advice. I'm going to try to give a positive impact in this clubhouse in whatever way that I can. At the end of the day, I have no control of what happens, whether it's a trade or not. Now, as for his overall role on the Mets, he said that they told me that sometimes I'll be DHing, sometimes I'll step in for a player if he's down that day. At the same time, I just have to go out there and compete whenever my number is called to help the team in any possible way. So yeah, I'm going to give my best every single time, every opportunity that I'm going to get. Now, it seems like there is a specific diminishing role, of course, for Starling Marte, which we all kind of expected with the addition of Juan Soto, the addition of different outfielders who are better defenders as compared to Starling Marte last year, who was god awful in right field. Um, but I feel like it blossoms somewhat of concern going into the season. I don't know if it's going to just be like this for the rest of the season. Obviously, the offense being a little bit more deep right now, you probably could afford to have a little bit more of a platoon here. But again, it continues to be this concern that we've talked about of, Starling Marte making $20 million this year to be a Swiss Army knife player, I guess that's what we can call it, something like that. And then also including the diminishing abilities that he has had over these last two seasons. We saw something that Mendoza was one of the advocates for keeping Starling Marte. We also saw Marte say that if, they wanted to trade me, I would be gone by now. I don't know what this situation is. I feel like it's all kind of being overblown in the way that where it's like, okay, obviously he wants to be here. Starling Marte, he's not a dislikable person, okay? He's a great guy. We know that a lot of people in that clubhouse love him. I feel like it's all more in the technical term, of course, with his overall role. But we'll see how it goes down the season. Frank, is there any thoughts on his thoughts or anything that you're breaking down here? Because, like, I feel like we've talked about this many, many times before at this point, but going into the season, fitting him into this role, I don't know how it goes in this way. Maybe if there is an injury, it makes a little bit more sense, but like, I still just don't know where it's fitting in here as to where it can possibly make sense. Because right now, I just feel like the Mets, the feel of, in technical term, is they're stuck with him. Like they're just stuck with him being here.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to me, it's like I'll start first with the Mets approach. I like that he said that from the beginning they were very transparent with him and being like, "Listen, if we get one, like they're very realistic. Like, listen, we understand what you provide for us, Marte, but like if we get Juan Soto, you are not playing right field anymore." So the fact that they told him that from the jump, I think is really awesome. So they let him know, and they said, we're paying you $20 million, and you're not really gonna have too much of a role. So we are going to try to facilitate a trade. It didn't work out. And then Marte, for the most part, he says the right things. And from what we've seen, just like the little videos and stuff like that on social media of him like having fun with the guys and like being another third base coach or whatever, like his actions that I've seen on the camera they go along with what he was saying,
Yes.
like in those quotes. So like the actions kind of match the words, so to speak. Now again, it's like yes, he's in front of a microphone, yes, he's in front of a camera, but I have no reason to believe that he's a different person outside
No,
of that,
absolutely
like
not.
actually in the clubhouse and everything like that. So I'm glad that he's not, because I mean, some guys could be kind of a little problematic with things like this, kind of be like, oh well, you guys aren't playing me. I'm on the bench. Winker starting over me, and could be disgruntled and not have such a positive attitude and outlook that he's had on the situation. So I've liked the way he's handled it and just been like a really good teammate and a veteran, just that the guys have fun with. And this team, I mean, let's not forget that as much as bring in Iglesias and Lindor lead off spot, all this other stuff. Like there was something to like the vibes, the clubhouse that I think just gave them that little extra boost, and just all the guys getting along, playing loose, having fun. It just kind of helped them prevail all the adversity that they suffered. So I feel like keeping everybody happy and keeping the clubhouse, the way it is, I think is not the worst approach in the world. And I mean, one more thing to consider is that, like, listen, Brandon Nimmo is still not 100%. So right
No.
now he said he's at 91%. And to be honest, when it comes to something like plantar fasciitis, I thought this would have cleared up by now. I do have to be honest, because we talked about this injury. It was October. Now we're in February, and he's still dealing with it a little bit.
Yeah.
It's something that it can flare up again from time to time. I mean, we've seen Carlos Correa really deal with it a lot. I mean, in one foot, then got the other. So it's something that could keep popping up a little bit. So I feel like having another starting caliber corner outfielder on your bench isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world if something were to
Yeah.
happen. Because like, let's say you did just like trade Marte, you do the McCann aspect where you pay most of the contract, get some lottery ticket guys who are just like not major league ready at all in return, and then something does happen to Nimmo. What do you do now? I mean, like what is the solution there? I mean, we don't really have another. I mean, we want to talk about Jose Azocar because he's on the 40-man roster, hit a home run today. Like, is that
Yeah.
your solution? I mean, I feel a little bit bad about Marte doing it. So it's one of those things that, like, we'll see how it plays out. I mean, maybe he gets off to a hot start and he does really well against left-handed pitching, and then something pops up where you can make a trade that like somebody has a surplus in the starting rotation, and then you could get that starter if you're continuing to not be able to come back from all these injuries, and the starting pitching is still like the main weakness, and kind of they get some offense, you get some pitching, win-win for both sides. That's the
Yeah.
hope. But for right now, because of where we are in the off season and now into spring training, you just gotta stick with what you got, and
Yeah.
just kind of make the best of it, which it seems like that's what Marte is doing. And the Mets have him here right now, and we'll see what his role is. Obviously, I want to see him hit home runs, but as long as he's providing something, what it comes down to is like just be better than Darren Ruff, continue to be a good teammate, and I think we'll be all right.
Yeah, and if he wasn't better than Darren Ruff, it would be 20 times the salary that Darren Ruff was getting, to not be as good as Darren Ruff. Again, listen, I don't think that I think it gets very misconstrued in the way that I kind of talk about the Marte situation. Marte, and this is something that I've said before, but it gets overlapped. Marte, going into the early 2010s, this is one of my favorite players in the game. Like, I was a big fan of Starling Marte. Obviously, as a player, we all know that the whole steroid thing kind of obscured things a little bit, but they brought him in. Of course, he had a great 2022. Recovering from these surgeries, it just doesn't seem like right now, um, it doesn't seem like right now he is the same player, and he isn't, of course. And I feel like at one point there's a wear down on your body as to where, he just keeps getting hurt. Now, if he ends up getting hurt in spring, if he ends up getting hurt again, that's when it's going to get a little bit concerning, because again, with this diminished role of he's playing the outfield once a week or something like that, and then he's DHing, there's not really much of a window for him to get hurt again. It's just I'm just saying it's a very diminished part, and a very it's not Vogelbach bad of value, it's not Rough bad of value, but I'm just saying it's a very Swiss Army knife type of situation that you don't want to be paying $20 million to. And I do believe that his money is the main reason as to why they didn't splurge as much as they did with the pitching staff. And some will say that we have Steve Cohen money no matter what. It's not as simple as that. It just is not as simple as that when you're looking at it from Steve Cohen's net worth compared to baseball payrolls and penalties, and the overall stipulation of just overall return on investment. Like that's basically how I, look at it from as at one point there's going to be somewhat of a cutoff because Steve Cohen, again, putting in the money that he is. So when you have this money attached to the name of Starling Marte, who, if he does give you a career year, he's going to give you, I don't know, like a 1.5, two win season. Still not enough to that 20 million per value. So again, when we say, from Brad saying, Marte and McNeil's money is hurting this roster, it is in a sort of way in the situation. And it may not be something that gets that much sympathy in the way because of the deep pockets of Steve Cohen. But the way that they kind of operate in this way, and even Steve Cohen said it, it's like, I'm not just going to spend out the wazoo because I have it. I'm not just going to go off and keep it going. So again, the Marte salary is the main reason as to why this is really, really tough value, and also the declining ability where he has not been himself these last 2 years. He hasn't been healthy these last 2 years. So relying on this as a DH platoon with Winker, and as much as I do like Winker, per just position, and even though the Mets lineup is deeper than it was, per this position, all these other contenders, because again, for hitters, they play every day, so it's just overall, flattened out value. The Braves have Marcell Ozuna. Dodgers have Ohtani, obviously. Phillies have Schwarber or Castellanos. And our answer to that is Winker and Marte. It's not great. I don't like it. I don't like it. I'm not the fan of it. And I can see this possibly going south. Not in the way of what player they are, what person they are, because again, for the fans out there that completely take everything personally that we say and think we're just brutally insulting them, we're being brutally honest. Tagline. Anyways, I'm saying it's like, per the value, there's a concern there. And you can tell me that he bats 300 against left-handed pitching, even though he had 40 plate appearances last year against left-handed pitching because he was banged up. Again, you're splitting hairs into what value you can get out of $20 million. And this is the thing, a power at DH, which we don't have. We just don't have, which, again, if you're going to do a platoon, I at least would like to have one competitive hitter, which is Winker, who doesn't chase, gives you quality ABs, and then the other one be a power bat. I'm just not seeing that balance it out in that way. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but it's still just not a really good bounce for value, especially when you see other areas on this team, the starting pitching staff. It's money that's being acclimated very, very poorly. I've said it many, many, many times. They can't really do anything about it. Marte's a great guy. I like him as a person, but the overall, thought of how this is being acclimated and seeing other weaknesses on this roster, I feel like it kept them from doing a few things. Marte's salary keeping them from what? I mean, right now, with tax, you're at $385 million, which is the highest they've ever been, like pretty much the highest that they've ever been, compared to 2023, which I think it's like 8 million below or something like that. They are, they're going to be in a position. And then you also can add in Jeff McNeil as well. 20 million, 15 million, 35 million right there. What is 35 million that goes to on this market? A frontline starting pitcher. Frontline starting pitchers get 35 million and maybe even less considering the years. So again, the acclimated part of this roster, personally, I think it keeps us from being better. And again, this sounds like a hot take, an overall acclimation. I understand that everyone has these attachments to these players, But I feel like we'd be chesting up to the Dodgers right now if we did not have those Marte and McNeil contracts here. That's a hot take. I understand it, but I feel like the roster would be deeper in that sense because you can acclimate the money a lot better. And that's the main reason as to why I say Starling Marte as a platoon DH at 36 years old, where he provides no power, making $20 million. There's nothing you can do. There is nothing you can do right now, and that's what sucks.
Yeah, I mean, a few things. Number one, when we're talking about like what else the Mets could have done, they offered Teoscar Hernandez a contract, and
They
they
did.
didn't go that extra step. I mean, that was more so with the years. But where does Teoscar go back to? The Dodgers. So I mean, that's one guy that maybe they could have offered more money this year, and with McNeil's contract, maybe a little more money next year to
It was
kind of
probably
sweeten it if they
backloaded.
didn't want to go the 3 year deal. They could have done something like that. But I think more so in general, what people have to consider when we talk about like Winker and the fit there is that this lineup, as even though we have some question marks, it has some of the most power potential in Mets history. I
It
think when you just
does.
look at with pure home runs, like we look at the totality of what everyone was talking about, like the 100 percentile outcome, like you have two guys that have 40 home run potential, and then you have two more guys that have 30 home run potential, a couple more guys who give you 20. I mean, like they could give you a whole lot of power, but having somebody like Winker who has that patience in between good on base percentage along with a Nimmo, it's like we spell complementing the pieces around you. It's like ideally you want a DH to have a lot of power, but wait a minute, my catcher has really good power. Consistency, we'll see. My third baseman has phenomenal power. I have Juan freaking Soto and I have Pete Alonso.
Yes.
And I got Lindor, one of the best power shortstops. I have Siri who give me home run power in center field. So like, ideally you want a DH with power, but sometimes when we talk about the fit, you might want a guy that has a little bit better on base percentage to put around all these other guys. So I
Which
mean
Marte
that's
doesn't.
which Marte does not. So
That's the thing. That's what I mean. It's like,
he was signed 3 years ago before all
yep.
these other guys came on board. We didn't know
Yeah.
Juan Soto was going to be here when we signed Marte. We didn't know Vientos was going to take off to the next level. Like we didn't know all these things that were going to happen. We knew that was a contract that you're paying for the first couple of years, and
Yeah.
you just kind of hope for the best at the tail end. We didn't know it'd be this bad, but we enjoyed at least one of the years a whole lot. I mean, that first season, he
Yeah.
was
It
a
was
massive,
awesome.
massive piece. But I think one more thing when it comes to the leadership for the veterans, these players in the interviews they've been doing this spring training are still talking about the impact that JD Martinez had on. That doesn't mean I'm advocating for him to come back, but there is something to be said for veteran leadership. And like it was
Another late spring training signing of JD Martinez.
no, but it's more so
Yeah.
like they're not talking about Chavez, they're not talking about Barnes, like they're talking about JD Martinez.
Mm-hmm.
So, when JD's ready to hang it up, I'm all for bringing it back in some kind of capacity to be in the organization to help my right-handed hitters in particular. You keep hearing Vientos and Alvarez specifically talk about them.
Yeah. I mean, again, Martinez is obviously going to, I feel like he's going to fit in well as a hitting coach or some kind of hitting coordinator in some organization when he does retire. Rosie K saying bring Martinez back as a coach, but we have Eric Chavez for that. Eric Chavez is a genius. So, anyways, Donette and Anthony saying in the end, all you can do is what you can do. Marte and McNeil are deals that Stearns probably doesn't make, especially McNeil. Nobody makes the McNeil deal, to be honest. You can only do what you can do. That's the thing. It's like they're tied into that situation as to where, yes, the Mets lost to the Dodgers last year. Yes, they came up short and they weren't on that level. There's still some dead money here that can be swirled around in some way. I saw somebody in the chat, I don't know who it was, saying that, you know, Stearns wasn't going to, get you a big DH or anything. Again, like you said, Teoscar Hernandez was offered a contract. They tried. They definitely tried in that way. They just
And they
had
weren't giving
some sort of
Santander 5 years.
limits.
Like
They weren't
that's
going to
not
give 5 years to
Stearns.
Santander.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. And if he was a little bit younger, like in the like 28, maybe there could have been a possibility, but there would have to be some stipulations in there. They also offered a contract to Jock Peterson, which they were willing to go 2 years for. So again, they were looking. They knew that this was going to be something, that they were going to have to do, but they had to stretch it to a point where expecting Marte to be back, and he ends up being back. They don't move him. And, next year, you're also going to have some other dead money as well still here with Jeff McNeil for one more year. Obviously, it's less than that. And I do think that when you have, Winker off the books next year and Marte off the books, so you're going to be looking in that DH department most likely. I think that there's a guy in Philly that I would pursue head over heels for. But again, that's a different type of look there. Because right now they're kind of just waiting out the last bits of things to have roster flexibility, and that's the main reason as to why they need to be flexible in these other points. And like I've said, if there's a reason why Stearns built the rotation like this, is the exact reason of what you're seeing right now. Injuries. That's it. That's it. There's injuries. They don't develop any of these arms, and then you also have some of this money here in Marte and McNeil that doesn't help. Because again, like we have said, on singular player, it's $35 million combined right now with Marte and McNeil on base salary. Then you're adding 110% to that. It's a lot. It is a lot. And that's the main reason as to why it's not just the overall base money, it's also the base plus the tax that it's taking up for you. So there's definitely repercussions in that way. And to get the bang for your buck at any point with Starling Marte here is suspect. It's suspect in that way, because it's like, okay, he's had stretches where he has not hit once whatsoever. Yes, he's hit left-handed pitching better, and to be honest, I don't know why. Did he play? No, he wasn't. No, but he was facing right-handed pitchers in live BP, which is weird. But I don't know why he was facing right-handers. But again, I think it's just something that they're going to have to bite the bullet on now, and there's really nothing that you can do. If there's anything else you want to add on this, because I feel like we've talked about this so many times, of how Marte is being acclimated at this current moment. We've talked about the Vogelbach and the rough of the value that they give you. Now it's kind of just amplified into a sucky point because he's making $20 million. So again, there's somewhat of a cutoff there, and it's keeping you from doing some things. I'm just saying it is. Maybe it won't be a problem next year because you're going to have lots of attendance this year, and maybe they make more money. Who knows? But because that was one of the main factors as to why, the Mets kind of are putting on a little bit of a cap here, but still pursuing for the long term, of course, signing Juan Soto. But I don't know. It's just, it's really right now, you're just waiting for things to wear off with Marte. Like that's it. And there's nothing they can really do. There really isn't.
Yeah, I mean, like we're talking about, it's some of those things you inherited, so it's not
Yeah.
all the way clean, so to speak. But I think one of the other things too is that, like, if Pete Alonso opts out next offseason, which I mean probably does, there's a lot of guys that become available. When you're looking at like the money that the Mets would have
Yeah.
to them, like that's another X amount of money available plus Marte's contract off the books. So they still don't really have some of those things locked up long term. Like that's why DH is still open. Like first base might be open again. So it's like that whole idea of like maybe Mark Viento's future is at first base. Like that could still be a conversation that we're having next offseason. So there's still like more things to be determined because like some guys are locked up long term, but not everybody. So I feel like that's one of the other things to consider is that maybe once Stearns gets to like fully assemble the like what he has in mind, that's when we'll kind of see the vision of like who's going to be where and for how long. But right now, like we said, they're still kind of playing this out. I don't think the Alonso thing really went the way they intended. I feel like they would rather just had him on like the 5-year, whatever, 5-year deal, 6-year deal on a much cheaper AAV and just have that kind of locked in long term and not do what we did this offseason again. But That's what's going to happen. So I mean, that's where they have to decide. It's like, does Josh Naylor become in the mix? And then we have like this
Yeah.
conversation next offseason. Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Like, Kyle Tucker's available. You're going to go like that market, like you said. Hopefully Schwarber. Like, there's going to be options. Somebody like Cody Bellinger. Obviously Vlad's going to be out there if Pete opts out too. So
Yeah.
like there's a lot of different scenarios that could happen. We just don't know it quite yet. And I feel like if there is a great opportunity available, if Alonso's off the book, Marte's off the book, I don't think they're going to let McNeil, just like 1 year of McNeil, totally deter them from like a
No.
huge piece for the
It
future.
won't. No, it won't. It won't. And I think it feel like, the backloaded contracts are probably something that they did offer to Peterson and Teoscar Hernandez and, guys like that. But because right now, a lot of the extra million, it's not just the extra million, it's the extra million plus the million with the tax. Like it's a lot more repercussions than I think a lot of fans think. It's not just base salary or tax salary or, the CBT. There's other different stipulations that kind of tie you up in that way. So a big chunk of that being 35 million to Marte and McNeil, there's a lot going on there. There really is a lot in that way. So we'll see how they kind of address that. I think Mart is the contracts given out specifically is out of all of them that they're paying or whatever. I think Marte and McNeil are the only ones that were given out by Billy Epler that are still here, right? I think.
Nimmo.
Nimmo. Never mind.
Yeah.
Nimmo. All right. Well, Nimmo
I mean, I
is
mean,
not
we'll
a.
see what happens like with Diaz and stuff like that.
Oh
But
yeah, Diaz. Oh, never mind.
yes,
So
as far as like
expiring deals, I guess. Yeah.
yeah, so as far as like the position players though, I mean, slowly but surely they're getting there with like Stearns guys, so to speak. But
Yeah.
even then, like Lindor was inherited, but he's going to be here for a long time, you would think. So, those are things you inherit though. Like those are like a couple of other big long term deals that are here as you're trying to add in more pieces.
Yeah. We've said from the Marte point of view, that there's a lot of Mets fans that, of course, Marte has been good and he was an all-star for us in 2022. But ever since then, it's been tough. And I saw some Mets fans in our chat of talking about Marte and the you know in last episode that we did with Till Mets Do Us Part, kind of talking about it from, Mets fans have like this very revisionist history of this Marte situation. Not really us. We talked about this 4 guaranteed years being a tough pill to swallow. We knew that he could be a really good player, but we also could see a downside as to where it really tanks towards the back end, and it came even earlier. So again, it's just not great of a situation. We'll see what happens. There's some things that you can hang your hat on. Maybe the high leverage numbers for Marte have been good when he's healthy against left-handed pitching, like we said. But when it comes to the response to other teams at the DH position, even though again the lineup is deeper, it's not a good response. It's kind of how it's kind of how I look at it from, the division that the Raiders are in. They had all these big coaches or whatever last year, and their response to it was Antonio Pierce, who has not coached before he came in here, against Sean Payton, Jim Harbaugh, and Andy Reid. All of them who are, proven coaches who have made, big postseason runs in the past. So again, it's like that type of answer. It's not really going to get you anywhere. But again, that's kind of a very simple way of thinking. But again, I feel like at one point, they will be able to go loose of that money and get the bang for your buck for an actual DH. Right now, this platoon is like, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But having Juan Soto here definitely helps to protect things like that.
Exactly. I mean, it's like a small short term thing for the hopeful 15 years of Juan Soto. It's like, you know what?
It
You
is.
deal with the year of Marte just being weird, platoon, DH, whatever, just
Yeah.
so you have Juan Soto for a long time. It's more so like think about the big picture here, playing the long game, so to speak.
Yeah.
you make that sacrifice. Like I'm okay with it. Like it's just for this season, and then we
Yeah.
can move on and see what happens.
Yeah, the only fear that I have from this is basically just the offense that you're going to have to compete with being not the Dodgers, the Braves, because the Braves are going to come back next year. They're going to be healthy. They are a deep lineup. They have a lot of good hitters in that lineup. And the Mets, there's some parts of it where it's like, okay, maybe this does not match up great, and they're probably going to get abused in that way. With the overall offense that they're probably going to, which I expect they will, but you just never know. And Darren Rivera puts it perfect just to put a bow on this one, saying Marte is an injury-prone player who relies on his legs as a major weapon, and his age has taken its toll. That's pretty much it. That's how you can pretty much recap it with Starling Marte. So it's definitely just not really good acclimation in that way. That personally I think holds this team back from being better than it obviously is. But there's really nothing they can do about it. It's the inheritance, like we talk about it. Now, speaking of performance that we do know of, games have now officially been played in Mets land. And that means one thing: the return, the long awaited return of everyone's favorite segment, Studs and Duds. One player that has performed well in these first 3, 4 games, 2 that haven't been televised. Weird how it is in spring training. And then one who did not have a great outing. Usually the first week or first 2 weeks usually comes from pitchers. They populate this one pretty well. But overall, guys, let us know your studs and duds in the comments, in the live chat. Frank, I will bring it over to you. Your stud for this one. There's some ones that stand out pretty well.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I could take the obvious one, but I'm actually going to go with P. Alonso. He had the hit today. He went to right center, drove in a couple of runs, and I was actually pleasantly surprised with the overturned call on the first game with the ball strike, where Pete like looked like he
Yeah.
took strike three, looking, ends up challenging it, was right, and then worked his way to a walk. So I did like to
Yeah.
see that. Having hitting behind Juan Soto, just not being like overly aggressive. Like, yes, it's spring training, so it wasn't much pressure in general, but just in general, we didn't see like that ridiculous chasing too. Because again, it's more so like with spring training, you're looking at process over results for me at least. So as long as I
Yeah.
don't see Pete just totally on front, totally whiffing, trying to overdo it, that's encouraging to me. I was like, as much as I love Juan Soto going left center field first, AB lefty lefty, I feel like for Pete, like it was just nice to see him kind of look much more relaxed, so to speak, and being able to draw his walk, go right center, not try to overdo it, going crazy. I mean, that's really what I want to see from him.
Yeah. When it comes to Pete so far, this is a very, very small sample. Again, I feel like he's taken like, what is it, 6 plate appearances so far. He's walked in half of them, I believe. That double that he had to the opposite field, which is ridiculous percentiles, let's just say for a second, 114 miles an hour off the bat, which was, I mean, that's vintage Alonso right there. So if we continue to see things
And
like that, yeah,
and tell the people what you told me and some of the upmet careers as far as like we think of P.
yeah,
Alonso, we think of high exit velo, but
yeah, yeah, we haven't seen him in those lists for a while. Like a year, it's been a year and a half since we have seen Pete Alonso put up, like those percentiles of exit velocity recently. Last year, he was, I guess, by decent nature hitting the ball hard, but some of the worst quality of contact of his entire career. So it was encouraging to see Pete do that. Again, situationally as well, we saw his struggles with wrists. So again, easy guy to put in there. Again, it's good to see him get off to a good start. Hopefully it continues. But the overall approach to the plate, it definitely has to be better as compared to 2024. So that was good to see right off the bat, and not see that come over very, very slowly. Let's go for me. My stud, I think I got it easily. Mention Clay Holmes, who was great. And I think that this transition to a starter role is off to a really good start. You just never know how it's going to be with that certain workload, but so far it seems like he's handled that with grace. But we talked about it more specifically of what Clay Holmes was able to do a few days ago. You obviously can put Juan Soto in there because he made his presence known in his first AB as a New York Met, with the big home run and everybody getting their excitement. And we had this Soto, my God, signs. I mean, it was nuts. I think, what was it? The second highest attendance
Yes.
in Port
Hmm.
St. Lucie spring training history. So, quite it, quite a performance so far, and one of the positives. Let's just say that. Now, as for the negatives, um, I think there's a few you can gloss over here. Nothing crazy, but there's been a few rough performances, I guess. Frank, again, these are more overreactions, of course, with the first batch of them.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I have to give it to my guy Jeff McNeil. I mean, he took another O for today. He's got a new stance, so take that
Yeah,
with what
when
it's
does he
worth. I
not?
mean, but what concerns me is that, like, the guy won the batting title with a certain stance, and it just feels like no matter how old he gets, he still doesn't know what he is. Like, I mean, I feel like he's just been here too long to be making all of these adjustments. It's like, because, the first half, oh, I'm a contact hitter. Then second half, no, I'm a power hitter. Like, it's just been going on too much. Again, we're looking at process here. And I feel like the process for McNeil is constantly changing and that just not seeing any consistency. And it's like, I'm seeing him fly out to right, fly out to center, fly out to left. So it's just like, I want to see line drives. I don't want, because he's not a power hitter. So I mean, these fly balls that just go, and
He's got a new
outfielders just
bat.
catch it. It's
He's
not
got a
going
new
to do much
bat,
to it.
a new stance. He's got a
Yeah,
brand new brand. He's got
yeah,
everything. So,
yeah. So I mean,
listen,
I just feel like he's just getting a little too old for all this new stuff. I mean, if he was a young player, only a couple seasons in, you're trying to make adjustments. That's fine. But with McNeil, it's constantly something different, and it's just not been working. So I just am concerned that he, like, Alvarez going to a new stance, I'm okay with because he's still so young. But McNeil, I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, we have other options waiting in the wings here. So I'm telling you, for me, the runway is going to be very short. Where if I'm seeing this, not getting it done, and I got Acuna ready to go, I'm not afraid to make that switch. At least if I was in charge.
I can't say anything. Nothing. Don't. Again, it's overreact. I'll save it. I'll save it for more down the line. I'm not even gonna go there. Anyways, for me, Danny Young was somebody that was mentioned by Danny Rivera. Danny Rivera, Darren Rivera, Danny Young. He had a rough outing. What was it? Walking one, he hit a batter or something like that. That was rough. Obviously, there's not really much of substance for studs and duds for the first week. It's more of just the first taste there. Ty Adcock had a really, really rough outing. Tidwell, you can put in there as someone because he was all over the place as well. I saw somebody mention Brett Beatty for studs. He does this every fucking spring, so I'm not even. I can't. I'm sorry. I'm not putting my chips in for it right now.
And the thing with Beatty, the frustration is that, like, he's someone that every time he gets sent down to AAA has crazy numbers.
Yeah.
And guess what? He's facing AAA pitchers, so this is what he's going to look like. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the sad part, is that, like, we're going to see
Yeah.
like these big performances, and then it might kind of fool you a little bit, because there's like, then when he gets to the majors, then we go back to the same things. Me again, I'm looking at process, and like, I'm still seeing some ground balls, like I'm seeing some double play balls. Like, that's more concerning to me, is that, like, I don't, he had some nice ones in the gap, but if he's hitting the ball on the ground, yikes. I mean, it's a big problem. That's been his big issue, one of his big issues. So I don't want to see the constant ground balls too.
I'm again, like, I'm choosing right now to ignore it. Like, I'm choosing to ignore the things that piss me off. Like what's going on with Jeff McNeil. I'll get to it. I'm procrastinating in that way. Brett Beatty, I ain't getting excited again. I can't do it. I heard, oh well, he has the max exit velocity leading of the day and everything. I don't care. I really don't. I like to basically point out, some of the little positives. We move on to the next day. I can't like I can't put it into anything. Everyone's just sitting there falling for it and saying that he's completely back now. I'm still seeing awful swings from him from secondary stuff. I'm seeing him get carved up by actual major league pitchers that he's been facing. Sandy Alcantara completely destroyed him. Like he looked completely overmatched against him. And then you bring in some meatball guy who was working at the supermarket last year and he hits a double. I'm not trying to just say and give no credit to him, but I'm going to need to see a little bit more this spring before I give him the first badge of honor of my stud of the week, because he's done this for 4 straight springs now. I mean, I don't want to say that he's a tease, but you're being a tease right now, Brett. Let's just say that. Anybody else that you want to mention for some? Because again, these are first impressions. There's nothing crazy.
Yeah, I mean, Jose Ascar, I mean, hitting a home run, like he's
Yeah.
not really a power hitter. So to see him go yard, I mean, that's always pleasant to see. Luis Torrens has had some nice swings, so I've liked what I've seen
Yes.
there. He went a little bit opposite field, hitting some nice line drives, so that was encouraging too. And then, like you mentioned, Clay Holmes was good. So there's still a lot to be determined. I mean, right now we still are dealing with just a lot of guys who really have no shot, especially on the pitching side, like no shot on the roster. We're still seeing a lot of that. So I feel like as rosters get trimmed, guys are going to play deeper into games. We're going to get more of a feel because there is plenty of guys that are out there that they're not really in the mix. So
Yeah.
it's hard to like overreact one way or the other.
Yeah. Simone Juan, one of our prospects, had a huge 3-run homer yesterday in West Palm Beach. That was nice to see. Definitely some, you know, definitely some guys that you can put out there. Winker actually had a really good game yesterday, but it was not televised.
Yeah,
He
it's the split
walked, had
game.
had a double down the left field line.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know what else happened there, but Alvarez has gotten some decent swings. Also has had some ugly ones. So we'll see how the adjustment is made with him as well. But listen, you know, if I'm hating on Beatty, listen, I'm the hater. Homie, I'm the hater. I don't know what to tell you. He's done this way too many times for me to just say, "Well, he's back. He's back." Anyways, speaking of back, let's get into some call-ins. I don't even know what that has in any relation to it. But for those of you in here, if you want to call into our show, a reminder that our hotline is open 24/7 for any comments, questions, etc. regarding our New York Mets. Call 845-208-5677 and send us a voicemail under 3 minutes long. Please refrain from using any offensive or derogatory language and try to keep it Mets related. All calls will be pre-screened. All calls will be pre-screened for obvious reasons. Numbers will be blocked if you violate any of these rules. It is a one-strike policy. Send us a voicemail anytime. 845-208-5677. That's 845-208-5677 for the chance to be a part of our show. Now we have one of our viewers, Truro, who is regularly in the chat, who had a call in for us. And I think it has a little bit more regarding the rotation, which we have talked about a lot. But let's see what he has for us. Let us know if you guys can hear him.
What's going on, guys? It's Truro here from the comments section, and doing an instant reaction to the Manaea news. I think it's very easy to overreact to this and hard to stay calm, especially when your ace from last year goes down. But, it's not looking good. You got Senga, Peterson, Holmes, Blackburn, Canning, McGill. I mean, depending on how bad this injury is, everyone's going to want Quintana. But I would look at a guy like Spencer Turnbull. If you look at the pitch profiler, I mean, he's got great stuff. well, 107 stuff plus not great, but for a starter, it's pretty good. He's got a good pitch mix as well. So, yeah, I mean, you could rock with McGill, Blackburn, Canning. I wouldn't. I mean, McGill's got an option. You might want to take advantage of that. But we're like one injury away from being at the depths of hell here with like Justin Hageman starting games. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, Sproat, that's not happening. It's basically confirmed they're just getting him ready for the minor league season, which I get. But I don't know. What do you guys think? You think we should get a starter or not? I mean, I think you could survive with this rotation for now, but you're going to need the lineup to pick up some slack, and you know how they hit in April sometimes. So, yeah, what do you guys think?
All right, thank you to Churro for calling in. A lot more of what we've kind of reiterated of the reliance on the rotation of, going forward. And that is a really good point that he said because, sometimes the Mets slow down. Like they have slow offensive production in April. And it's definitely been something that is a reason as to why you have some of the pitching concerns and, getting off to a slow start. Um, you know, at some point, I feel like they're going to try and deepen the depth with minor league signings. I don't think they're going to go major league. I feel like it's a little too late because, again, when it comes to pitching, and I feel like this is another factor that we didn't even talk about, pitchers and catchers report earlier for a reason, and these guys are going to have to ramp up at a slower pace compared to these guys. And I'm sure that they're staying loose right now, being available. But again, this is a different conversation when it comes to, JD Martinez, but it took quite a while for him to get here. It was like the end of April. So I don't know if it's going to really factor in as much to bring somebody in like that. Spencer Turnbull is somebody that I would go after. It was somebody that it was on my yes list for the last 2 years, even last year. So I would try to do that. I don't think it solves anything. But Frank, what are your thoughts here? Like I don't think it's like, again, I feel like we're repeating ourselves in this way, but I'll give you the transcript in this way, the best way that I can. But the rotation, it's a scary situation right now because we have two injuries already, and it's not even March.
Yeah, and it was like two of the at least one of the really good pitchers, and the other one that was
Yeah,
like had been okay, had some good moments in the past. Like it wasn't like Canning and Blackburn got hurt; it was Manaea and Montas. So that's the thing that really stinks that you have injuries and to two of the key guys in the rotation, not the guys in the back half. So that definitely is a big concern. But for Spencer Turnbull, I mean, a couple things. So keep in mind that he suffered the lat strain on the right side. It
yeah,
was June 27th, and then he gets transferred 60-day IL. You don't see him rest of the season. And not that all injuries are the same,
yeah.
but Frankie Montas has a lat strain. So, I mean,
He
these
does.
injuries, this kind of like I said in the beginning with Manaea, like some injuries are weird, where like you have a certain timetable of this is how long you expect the guy to be out, but then all of a sudden it's much longer than that. And I feel like considering that he did pitch well last season, in the small sample size, 54 innings, 265 ERA, he's 32 years old. Like those are things to like. So why is it February 24th and the guy's still available? What do we not know?
Yeah,
Is the medicals just still not looking too great? Does it still look like he could re-aggravate an injury? I mean, because there's got to be something that's going on here because he's too much of a good pick to not be selected by
yeah.
somebody. So that definitely does concern me. Or is he trying to mark himself as a starting pitcher and maybe some teams want to make him a reliever? There's a lot of things that could be going on here. So, even though I feel like it makes sense for the Mets to go a little younger and add another arm into the mix, there's got to be something that's holding them and 29 other MLB teams out of the Turnbull market.
Yeah, I mean, there could be again this luxury tax thing. If you're talking about it per value, $5.3 million, and then it would probably be a little bit double plus that. You know, 10 million for Spencer Turnbull, who has not really been stretched out as a starter. Again, bringing in a pitcher right now for the overall just him getting ready, I don't think that it's going to be much of an impact for opening day, and you're probably just going to have to stay internal because he probably, even if he is staying loose, even if he is somewhat healthy, recovering from an injury is one thing, but also the fact that he needs to ramp up too, which pitchers and catchers, they get like, week and a half more compared to the hitters. So again, I don't know if he would be, if they were to sign him right now, he would be ready to be in the opening day rotation. And it would just be kind of a rush. That's the thing. And that's why I say internally, that's it. I'm not really completely, aggressively going after possibilities because I feel like, yes, there is concerns in the rotation, but I feel like that there's some fans that look at it from an angle where they kind of forget the context in this way. Like, yes, the rotation doesn't look great, and yes, the rotation has a lot of question marks, and yes, we have 2 injuries already, and it's not even March. But again, if you do bring in a pitcher here, they're going to have to ramp up. They're going to have to get a full spring training, and then you're end up going to be behind either way. So again, it's either they do this internally, they wait out what's going on with Sean Manaea. There's not really much that they can do. And that point that you made of like, why isn't Spencer Turnbull signed yet? Maybe he's just asking for more. I don't know what he is doing. I think the latest pitcher that we have signed was obviously what was it? It was Julio Tehran, and that didn't end up going well. But Taiwan Walker, when we signed him, it was still like before pitchers and catchers reported. Like it wasn't, while spring training games were going. So I feel like that's the main concern right now. And that's probably the reason why, there's a force in a way, for Mets fans to replace a guy on the roster, but there's not really many ways in context that it will really help right now. And I feel like right now, at the maximum right now, if you were to sign a pitcher this instant who's to a major league contract, maybe you get him in the first week of April. And I don't think that it's going to really do much. Max Krennic, another guy that we didn't mention for studs, he pitched pretty well too. Jose Budo, another thing that probably will be in the conversation to maybe stretch him out to be a starter, but I think they're more hard set on him being a reliever now, and I get why. I want to protect a rubber arm. I don't need to waste out and burn out a rubber arm because burning rubber, again, it's not a great mix. Let's just say that. But it's probably going to fall now on Tyler McGill again, and we'll see what happens with Blackburn and his leaky spine. Again, you could trade for a pitcher. You could. I saw somebody earlier before I think we even started talking about Crochet, and we weren't willing to part with prospects. So these prospects better be Hall of Famers. Again, we talked about it before that the Red Sox had the farm to trade for him. We really didn't. We would have had to empty out a lot there, which seems weird because it seems like the Mets always have to give up so much, and compared to other teams to get all these guys, doesn't seem like much. Maybe it's because we're not familiar with those names. And again, I'm easy saying trade for Jordan Montgomery. Jordan Montgomery is also not a guarantee completely either. It's also a contract that you would have to take on that Mets are probably not trying to do. It's just they're kind of in the situation right now where the depth is getting tested right now. Guys were looked at as depth, and now they're looked at as key points, and they're going to have to rise up into a point where they get healthy, and they're not healthy right now. 2 of their key pitchers are already down. It's not even March yet. I'm not completely panicking, but there's definitely a concern going into opening day. Down the stretch of the season, I'm still okay with it saying, okay, maybe this works out. Maybe there's a young pitcher such as Sproat or Tidwell that comes up down the stretch and does well. There are options here, but I feel like at this current moment where it's not even March yet, there's no real source for panic. It's more of just the PTSD of Mets fans saying, well, let's go. We got to do something else here. They can't really do much in the context part of it. Yes, they do have a need at starting pitcher right now, but it's more of just full on panic to do that. And it doesn't help you really in the long run, because I feel like just right now the context matters, and the context is that pitchers are going to have to ramp up and they're going to be behind if we sign them. And I understand, Jose Quintana, if he wants to come back or whatever. But it seemed like from John Heyman, we got something that the Mets had some concerns about, some underlying metrics, which I also do have, but Goody all right to end the season. Let's bring him back, But I would kind of leave that set. But again, you can talk about, injuries until you're blue in the face. They're going to continue to happen.
Especially when it comes to pitching. I mean, that's kind of what I've been talking about. It's so, like, I mean, it's predictable that pitchers are going to get hurt, but not how many and not which ones, but you just know it's going to happen. So you have to be prepared for anybody to happen. And there could be, you have years where maybe most of your rotation gets through it all the whole way through. And then you have other years where most of your guys go down. I mean, that's just one of those things that it's just very unpredictable like that.
Yeah. Right now, it's been an injury-plagued week so far. Hopefully that dies down because we're running out of bodies right now. But I think the Mets are looking at it from the quantity that they have to try and get to the trade deadline, and maybe that's when they bring the chips all in. I feel like the names in the rotation, it just completely goes out the window now. Like there's really nothing that you can do. It's basically who is going to be available, who's not going to be dead today. That's basically how you approach the pitching, and it's a lot different now, but that's just how the game is now. And at this current moment where, again, pitchers are already somewhat stretched out to 3 or 4 innings already, that pitcher that you bring in is going to be behind. And who knows, maybe Manaea is back by the time that pitcher you brought in to replace him is ready. Who knows? You really, really have absolutely no idea. You also have a little bit strapped right now with the luxury tax situation. So it's not like you can all just, sign this guy, do it right now, and that's it. You just never know. You never know. You have 162 games to play, and this is basically the hand that you have been dealt. But we'll see what happens. Why wait to the trade deadline and have an acquisition for half a year? Because of the position that you're talking about. That's it. The position you're talking about, because even if you do trade for a guy, you're going to have injury concerns with them. Like that's literally it. That's the position. That's it. Like there's nothing you can do. Nothing is going to solve a pitcher injury epidemic. Maybe the consistency, maybe it does get solved, which it could be down the line at the trade deadline for that last final push. But right now, you just need innings. You need 162 games worth of baseball that you need to play. And injuries are just going to happen. You never know.
Exactly. I mean, that's just kind of the way it works. I mean, every now and then you have a guy like a Freddie Peralta from the Brewers, but that's about it.
It's just more of every given day, don't invest anything in pitchers at this point. To be honest, don't do anything, because there's nothing that you can do to prevent this type of thing from happening, being the injuries. Whether you're talking about overall consistency, the Mets, again, they don't have the resources that the Dodgers have yet as to where they can just fill their rotation with the greatest of all time, and then still have more money left over from their money laundering scheme that they do. So anyways, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Gone over 2 hours, tons to talk about. But we will see. Spring training has just begun. But as for the wrap up, Frank, some last thoughts here to wrap us up, and then we'll get going.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we get to see Brandon Nimmo this week. I mean, I like to see him get back on the field and just, as we're going to see like more guys built up and get more reps when it comes to the major league level. And more games of Juan Soto in a Mets uniform and get to see Lindor some more. So, baseball is back. They have quite a few road games coming up this week. Well, they had the road game today, too. So, not able to see all of them, which can be frustrating. But, at least there are baseball games to talk about. And like we've been saying, just hopefully no more injuries, particularly with the pitchers.
Yeah. Let's just hope that you can, come out of camp healthy. It looks like the next game will be on the road, but it's going to be on MLB Network. For those of you who have it, Austin Warren is going to get the start. I don't know if it's going to be like an abbreviated thing if they see him as a starting pitcher, because I'm pretty sure he's more of a reliever. But we'll see who we get to see. Senga, we have yet to see anything from him. Hopefully, all is good with him. Griffin Canning, we have not seen yet. We've definitely still haven't seen some of the everyday players. Most of the relievers as well, we have not seen. I don't think we've any relievers particularly.
Yeah, I mean you're not going to see Minter, so you already know
You're
that.
not going to see
Then
Minter for a
you'd be looking
while.
for
Um,
Stanek and those guys.
yeah,
Garrett, SRF, we'll see.
no, we haven't seen them yet. No, there may have been one really, like we saw Danny Young. That was it. That was pretty much
Yeah,
all we saw, and it
yeah.
wasn't great. Let's just say that. But again, spring is still fresh. You're about like 4 days into it, 5 days into it, and we will be able to do as much coverage as we can throughout the entirety of spring training going into the regular season. For those of you in here, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the conversation, the long-winded conversation. For those of you watching or listening on playback and you want to join the conversation live in the future, make sure to subscribe to the Mets Weekly YouTube channel and turn on post notifications to know when we go live. And we have plenty of content, of course, coming out in the future, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Follow us individually. Follow Mets Weekly on X and on TikTok. Follow all of us individually, including our third co-host, Andrew, whose links are in the description. And of course, everyone, continue to enjoy your spring. Don't let the injuries completely ruin the fun of meaningless baseball and fun baseball in the fun Florida sun in Port St. Lucie. And let's hope to stay healthy. That would be great. Let's hopefully not report a major injury next week. That's the goal. All right. Small goal, but it's a goal. Anyways, finally, of course, let's go Mets. And we will see you guys next time.